I now call to order the Committee on House Administration for purposes of today's hearing examining the Architect of the Capitol and its Office of the Inspector General. The hearing record will remain open for 5 legislative days, so members may submit any materials they wish to be included. A quorum is present, so we may proceed. I would like to thank my colleagues and our witnesses for being here today. The Architect of the Capitol, Mr. Ayers, appeared before us in February. Mr. Ayers, as you know, with a full panel of witnesses, it was difficult to have a broad discussion, and I appreciate your willingness to reappear today. Before going into my opening statement, I'd like to take a moment to extend our thoughts and prayers to the entire Architect family and the family of Matthew McClanahan. As most of you know, Matthew died on April 18th of this year while serving the United States Capitol. He was one of more than 2,100 Architect employees who work around the clock to maintain and preserve these historic buildings and grounds, and we all thank him for his service, and we pray for the family and their loss. Mr. Ayers, thank you again for being here. When you testified in February, the committee focused on the future challenges and priorities of the Architect of the Capitol. Today, I'd like to direct our attention to a November 2016 report issued by the General Accountability Office highlighting problems with the Architect of the Capitol's Office of the Inspector General. The report, as you know, led to the resignation of Mr. Mulshine, the former Inspector General, 1 month later. Prior to 2007, the Architect of the Capitol had a single-person, non-statutory Inspector General. In December 2007, as part of the Consolidated Appropriations Act for fiscal year 2008, Congress established the Architect of the Capitol's first Office of the Inspector General. Congress created the office in response to concerns about the delays and escalating construction costs associated with the Capitol Visitor Center. Congress established a statutory Inspector General position to audit and report semi-annually on management and operations issues and other issues as required. Last November, the General Accountability Office, the GAO, issued a report on the Architect of the Capitol's Office of the IG operations, which raised some very serious concerns. GAO found that over a 4-year period from 2012 through 2015, the Office of the IG completed only 14 audits, none of which included audits of large-scale projects such as the Cannon House office buildings renovations. As you know, the Cannon renovations are expected to occur over the next 10 years at a cost of approximately $750 million. As the GAO reported, and I quote, OIG provided little assurance that AOC's most critical programs and contracts received adequate oversight, that audit resources were being applied to the most critical areas, and that the OIG's efforts would fully inform AOC's management and the Congress of any problems or deficiencies. In addition, GAO reported serious concerns with both the auditing and investigative functions of the Architect Office of the IG during this time period. Specifically, GAO noted, and I quote, the OIG's lack of adequate audit planning, lack of criminal investigators, and reliance on AOC program offices to conduct investigations of alleged wrongdoing have contributed to a significant decline in its audit and investigative reports and reported monetary accomplishments. This lack of transparency concerns this committee and calls into question the veracity and completeness of information presented to Congress about project management. GAO continued, as a result of the OIG's minimal audit report coverage, the Architect and the Congress may not be fully and currently informed about the operations of AOC's jurisdictions, offices, and major contracts. I look forward to hearing the GAO report, discussing that, and the diminishment of the Office of the IG with our witnesses today. I would also like to use this hearing to develop a strategy to move the Office of the IG forward under the direction of Mr. Failla. And again, I thank each of you for your appearances before our committee today. And I now recognize my colleague and the ranking member of this committee, Mr. Brady, for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, it's a pleasure to be here with the Architect of the Capitol, Mr. Ayers, and the new Inspector General and the GAO. When I became chairman of this committee, I inherited an over budget and behind schedule Capitol Visitor Center. Working with my colleague and my excellent ranking member, Vern Ehlers, we were able to partner with the architect's office to get the project back on track. As a result of that work was the creation of the Inspector General's office. So I know from experience with the CVC, the Capitol Dome renovations, and now the Cannon rehab, how important an independent set of eyes can be when you are spending billions of taxpayers' dollars. I appreciate, Mr. Chairman, your leadership on having these issues, and I look forward to hearing from our witnesses.
Gentleman yields back. Thank you, Mr. Brady. Any other member wish to be recognized for the purpose of an opening statement? Seeing none, I'd now like to introduce our witnesses. First, let me introduce Stephen T. Ayers, who was officially appointed on May 13, 2010 to serve a 10-year term as the 11th architect of the Capitol. The architect is charged with the sizable task of preserving the historical buildings around the Capitol, throughout the Capitol grounds, and ensuring the structural integrity and safety for millions of visitors who travel here each year to experience firsthand the rich history of our nation's government. Under Mr. Ayers' leadership, the architect oversaw the restoration of the U.S. Capitol Dome, restoring it to its original splendor. He also led the restoration of the Ulysses S. Grant Memorial, a campus-wide effort to restore and repair deteriorating stone facades, and launched the renewal of the Cannon House office building. So we thank you, Mr. Ayers, for being with us today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Also would like to introduce Christopher P. Failla, who was appointed on April the 17th, 2017, a little more than a month ago, as the architect of the Capitol's Inspector General. Before his appointment as the IG, Chris completed a 26-year naval career and retired as a Navy captain. And we thank you for your service to our country, as well as you, Mr. Ayers. His final assignment with the Navy included 3 positions within the Department of Defense's IG office, including Director for the Technical Assessment Directorate, Executive Assistant for the Deputy Inspector General for Policy and Oversight, and the Senior Military Advisor in Office for DoD OIG. So thank you for being here today and for your service. Now I'd like to introduce from GAO, Beryl H. Davis. She is the Director of Financial Management and Assurance at the Government Accountability Office, where her responsibilities include audits related to improper payments, grant management, agency internal controls, and federal inspectors general. Ms. Davis previously served as Vice President of the Standards and Guidance for the Institute of Internal Auditors, as well as the Director of Audit Services and Management Support for the City of Orlando. Ms. Davis is the author of the GAO report on the Architect of the Capitol's Office of Inspector General, which we will be discussing further during today's hearing. And so thank you, Ms. Davis, for being here today. The committee has received each of your written testimonies. You'll each have 5 minutes to present a summary of that submission. As you know, to help keep the time, we have a timing device there on your witness table. The device will emit a green light for 4 minutes and then will turn yellow when 1 minute remains. When the light turns red, it means that your time is out, and try to bring it in for a landing if you can at that time. Also remember to hit your mic button to get started. And so again, we thank each of you for joining us today. And at this time, the chair will now recognize the architect of the Capitol, Stephen Ayers, for his testimony.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Brady and members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity today to testify and provide an overview of the architect of the Capitol's Office of Inspector General. And we're incredibly pleased to have recently welcomed Chris Failla as our new statutory Inspector General. I believe that Mr. Failla's leadership and experience in several different roles, both in high-pressure environments and others, perfectly aligns with my efforts to transform and strengthen our Office of Inspector General. And I can tell you, in his first 30 days, he's already made a positive impact. The AOC Inspector General Act of 2007 afforded us the opportunity to improve and expand IG operations, and I remain fully supportive of this effort. And over the years, I have ensured that adequate resources are available to support the IG and the functioning of his office. In addition to providing these resources, I support the IG by setting policy as well as setting the tone with my leadership team to ensure that we fully support the IG and respect their independence. I firmly believe that the IG's value-added and independent audits, evaluations, and investigations positively impact my agency's success. We empower all of our employees to join in the effort to improve our performance and the effectiveness of our agency. We require a high-performing and engaged workforce to continue to deliver and improve upon the specialized services that we provide to the Congress and the American public. We use a variety of communication channels to encourage AOC employees to use the Inspector General hotline, as well as other avenues to ensure they avail themselves of the services of the IG. At a leadership level, when gaps or weaknesses in internal controls are identified or suggestions are made to improve our operations, we move quickly to address those in a timely manner. And I'm proud to report to you today that we've addressed each and every one of the more than 360 recommendations put forth by our statutory Inspector General to date. As an example, in the AOC's fiscal year 2016 Performance and Accountability Report, their Inspector General identified that the management of concurrent construction projects is one of our key management challenges. And our leadership team understands the importance and complexity of this that's associated with managing more than $1 billion in ongoing active construction work right now. We've implemented sound strategies and used the best tools available to incorporate planning, risk assessment, and risk mitigation, quality control techniques into our disciplined project management approach. We will continue our commitment to closing out all management challenges and opportunities and ensure the projects that we oversee remain on schedule, within budget, and free of waste, fraud, and abuse. Currently, we're working with the Inspector General on several ongoing audits and evaluations, as well as an agency-wide risk assessment that recently kicked off. And by focusing on these types of efforts that increase our ability to mitigate risks, the IG is able to maximize its effectiveness and advance the agency's goals and objectives. We believe that our partnership with the Inspector General furthers our efforts to improve transparency and accountability and reduce costs. And with your continued support and the support of our Inspector General, I'm quite confident we can continue to carry out that mission. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Ayers. The chair now recognizes Christopher Fiala for purposes of an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Harper, Ranking Member Brady, members of the committee, I am pleased to testify today regarding the Office of Inspector General's oversight of the Architect of the Capitol. I'm excited to be at the helm of the AOC OIG as its third statutory IG. Created in 2008, the OIG is a relatively newcomer to the IG community, overseeing a legislative branch agency that is 100 years old, that is hundreds of years old. There's enormous potential to strengthen our organization to adaptively oversee the agency's programs and operations with independence and objectivity. I joined the AOC after a 26-year career in naval aviation, retiring as a Navy captain. My last assignment over the past 3 years was with the Department of Defense OIG, where I was the director for the Technical Assessment Directorate, leading 19 engineers who conducted SIGI inspections and evaluations on major acquisition defense programs, along with military facility safety inspections. I also oversaw hotline complaints and congressional inquiries. This experience taught me that effective oversight requires audits with clearly defined objectives and criteria. I also learned how a successful Inspector General's office should be staffed, run, and exercise its independence. This perspective, among others, will guide my efforts to have well-defined objectives and scope in order to increase the effectiveness of our audits and evaluations. While AOC projects are large, we will do our review work in smaller chunks and report earlier in the project or program lifecycle, providing recommendations that can still affect change. Rather than monitoring the agency through the practice of being embedded and attending program meetings, we will be shifting to performing well-defined field work with timelines for deliverables and changing our process to ensure transparency in our work, and also enlist the help of subject matter experts where needed to lend credibility to our findings. The OIG has done a tremendous amount of work in the absence of an IG to address the GAO recommendations. They have executed the acting IG strategic plan, contracted for an agency-wide risk assessment, and a quality assurance review of the audit program. The OIG has scheduled a SIGI peer review for the investigative program while issuing a revised FY17 and 18 audit plan, thereby answering all of the GAO's concerns but one. That one issue concerns restoring criminal investigators with law enforcement authority. The AOC needs a program that can perform complex criminal investigations involving contracting and procurement fraud in major programs and contracts. However, I'm awaiting the results of the SIGI peer review to help provide the information to make this decision. In my first 30 days, I've noticed the need for realistic expectations in the face of our current resources and staffing. We are a small staff required to oversee the useful spending of approximately $1 billion of construction and improvements. This is a daunting task. I need to evaluate the leverage of contracting services, the need for additional staff, and prioritizing our work. Despite these challenges, my office will continue to be a vital resource at an important time in the life cycle of the U.S. Capitol by making the following changes. I've adjusted plans to devote more resources to focusing on the high-risk and high-impact activities of the agency. The initiatives and plans developed will transform the office and expand our in-house expertise. This means developing the right expertise to perform oversight work and increase our use of subject matter experts. We will also perform stringent follow-up investigations of recommendations and embark on proactive evaluations. Additionally, I've committed to meeting regularly with committee staffers interested in OIG matters and with Speaker Ryan's Director of House Operations to provide informational updates on our work. Currently, we have a number of exciting programs, audits, and initiatives underway. In April, we contracted with an independent certified public accounting firm to audit the AOC's 2017 financial statements. In May, we initiated an agency-wide risk assessment to help identify and appropriately consider the AOC's risks. We'll use the results of this risk assessment to assist us in future audit planning efforts. We'll continue to provide quarterly project status reports on the Cannon Renewal Project and on the Capital Power Plant to the appropriations committees. And we are also in the planning phase of a focused audit on contract change orders on the Cannon Renewal Project and expect issuing a report by the end of the fiscal year. Additionally, with our review of the U.S. Capitol Dome Restoration Project, payments completed are expected to be released this audit by the end of the third quarter. I'm also planning an evaluation to examine the possibility of product substitution on select projects. Our investigative program will continue to monitor the live hotline center we stood up 2 years ago. We've developed a new hotline poster which is on display across the AOC, and recently we've seen an uptick in hotline complaints along with seeing the first use of the AOC Speak Up program to make confidential contact with the OIG. My first 30 days has been a time of listening, constructive conversation with leadership, building on ongoing initiatives, and working to be responsive to stakeholder feedback. I will work hard to continue to improve our oversight capabilities to fight fraud, waste, and abuse, and I see my office's presence, oversight reports, as a deterrent to abuses as much as it is an office to find abuses. My written statement provides expanded detail on the ongoing OIG work, and I'll be happy to brief the committee in further detail on any of our efforts. Thank you for the opportunity to address the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Fiala. And now we'll hear testimony from Ms. Davis, and you're recognized for 5 minutes, and thank you again for being here.
Thank you. Chairman Harper, Ranking Member Brady, and members of the committee. I am pleased to be here today to discuss GAO's report issued in November 2016. This report addresses the extent to which the Office of Inspector General developed plans and policies for oversight of the Architect of the Capitol's jurisdictions, offices, and major contracts during fiscal years 2012 through 2015, and the extent to which such oversight was provided. The architect of the Capitol is responsible for the maintenance, operation, and preservation of the buildings and grounds that make up the U.S. Capitol complex. Overall, AOC programs are managed by 10 jurisdictions, supported by the Capitol Construction and Operations, which is made up of 9 central offices. Contracting plays a central role in helping the AOC achieve its mission in managing projects. During the time of our audit, there were 4 large ongoing mega projects with an estimated combined cost of over $1 billion. As the chairman noted, the AOC Office of Inspector General was established by the AOC Inspector General Act of 2007 as an independent and objective office to conduct and supervise audits and investigations relating to the AOC and to keep the AOC and the Congress fully and currently informed about problems and deficiencies related to the administration of programs and operations of the AOC. The office was established in part because of congressional concerns about time delays and cost overruns during the construction of the Capitol Visitor Center, which was opened to the public in 2008. GAO's recent audit determined that the office's audit planning during this period did not include an assessment of the AOC's risks or the assignment of priorities for conducting audits consistent with standards of the Council of the Inspectors General on Integrity and Efficiency, also known as SIGI. Instead, the Inspector General at that time emphasized a continuous review of mega projects, which the Inspector General defined as an effort to alert the architect and the Congress of contract management issues as they occurred. This approach and the prior Inspector General's efforts did not result in any audit reports of capital mega projects during the 4-year period we reviewed. Further, the office provided only 1 audit report of a capital jurisdiction program during the 4-year period. During this period, the office also reported a decline in total audit reports and monetary accomplishments and potential dollar savings. In large part because of the office's insufficient audit planning, a limited number of audit reports were produced, and there was a lack of coverage of the Capitol's mega projects. As a result, AOC management and the Congress may not have been fully and currently informed about potential problems and deficiencies relating to the administration of programs and operations of the AOC during the 4-year period. Our November 2016 report also addressed our review of the Inspector General's changes to the office's investigative operations. In fiscal year 2014, the Inspector General at the time removed the Office of Inspector General's law enforcement authority and the investigator's responsibility to complete criminal investigations. Instead, the Office of Investigators had responsibility for administrative investigations and relied primarily on another entity to perform criminal investigations, and on occasion, other AOC program offices to perform their own investigations. The Office of Inspector General has responsibility for ensuring the investigations comply with SIGI standards for investigations, which other entities are not subject to. These office changes contributed in part to a significant decline in investigative reports and monetary accomplishments reported by the office. Monetary accomplishments from investigations declines from $445,000 in fiscal year 2013 to $7,000 in fiscal year 2015. GAO made 2 recommendations to the architect of the Capitol Office of Inspector General in its report. The first was to revise and implement policies and procedures to provide audit reports based on planning that include risk assessment and assignment of priorities consistent with SIGI standards. The second was to obtain a peer review from another federal Office of Inspector General of the office's overall investigative operations, including consideration of its reliance on investigations performed by other entities, and to make any needed changes based on the results of such review. The former Inspector General agreed with our recommendations and stated that the office would implement them. We were recently provided with information on the office's efforts to address our recommendations, which we are in the process of analyzing. Chairman Harper, Ranking Member Brady, and members of the committee, this concludes my prepared remarks. I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Ms. Davis, for your testimony, and each of you for the testimony that you've given. We now have a time for our committee members to ask questions of each of you. Each member is allotted 5 minutes to question the witness. To help each member track their time, we'll use the same timing device that you have seen, and I'll now begin by recognizing myself for 5 minutes. There's so much raised in this report and things that are here, and just to kind of set the parameters, nobody ever likes surprises, and so when you go into the report and you read things that you weren't aware of, that's something that causes a little bit of concern. But I'll start, if I may, with you, Mr. Ayers, to ask you some questions on some of the things that are here. I want to talk for a moment about the decision that's in the report about removing the criminal investigators. How was that decision made? Was that, obviously you knew about the decision being made, I assume. Were you informed by the previous IG that that was going to be the new plan?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I was. And from a big picture perspective, you know, Mr. Fela is our third statutory inspector general, and I can recall our first statutory inspector general, Ms. Carol Bates, initially told me upon her arrival that she did not believe that deputization of our investigators was appropriate. I know about a year into her term, she changed her mind on that and informed me that she changed her mind and sought deputization of our investigators from the Justice Department and received it. And then our second statutory inspector general rescinded that. So I am aware of all of those comings and goings, and I believe whether they are criminal investigators or administrative, or whether they carry weapons or don't, is solely and completely an inspector general decision, and I haven't influenced them or asked them to take one action or another.
So do you, Mr. Fela, at this point, do you support having criminal investigators, or you said that's something you're evaluating now?
Yes, sir, I am evaluating that. I'm leaning in that direction. I believe that the AOC needs those folks to do proper fraud, bribery, et cetera, types of investigations that are in accordance with SIGI standards for investigations.
Okay.
I want to see what the peer review says about my investigators. I'm obviously new, and I'm still learning my people, and I think it's wise to understand the folks that you have doing that job before making that decision. And it's not a decision I take lightly, especially with the carrying of firearms around folks here at the Capitol and also the people within the AOC. But at the same time, I think there's mitigating things I can do as the IG to ensure the safety of people, and also not an intimidation factor, if you will, be present.
Well, you know, one of the concerns and one of the things that you've raised, Mr. Ayers, in your testimony, certainly in your written testimony, and certainly your job, is you worry about waste, fraud, and abuse. Now, waste is more negligent. Abuse could be negligence or some criminal, but fraud is criminal. So how do you properly go to see if you're going to do fraud without a criminal investigator? So that's, I know that's going to be part of your understanding and your thought process there. Ms. Davis, did you find in your report that one of the key reasons to not have criminal investigators or do away with them was because other employees were uncomfortable with the weapons in the office, or did I misread something?
There was some information that we came across about, concerns about having firearms, but that really was not the focus of our recommendation.
Sure.
And the reason we made the recommendation.
Right.
Our reason was, of course, the responsibility of the Inspector General to look at issues related to fraud, waste, and abuse.
Is it your opinion that the office would be more properly run, better oversight by the IG if they had criminal investigators? Is that your opinion?
We could not provide that opinion, and in fact, our recommendation really focuses on having a peer review, and that peer review would be, the peer reviewers would be in a better position to really make that determination.
Gotcha. And we may come back to this, but my time is almost expired, so I will now recognize the ranking member, Mr. Brady, for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, for the record, I need to say I'm a big fan of Mr. Ayers. I think you're doing a great job, and thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Could you just tell me a little update on the Cannon office building? You know, what the phases are and how far we have to go, and when would it be completed?
I'd be happy to, Mr. Brady. Thank you. So the complete renewal of the Cannon House office building is essentially scheduled to be complete in 5 different phases. The first phase was work in the basement level, and that took about 1.5 to 2 years. That work is now complete. It was complete on budget and on schedule. We now moved into phase 1 on the congressional election cycle, and we are well into phase 1. Phase 1 is progressing on budget and on schedule as well. All of our indicators and all of our analysis tell us that that trend of remaining on budget and on schedule will continue. The next phase of that, of course, the phase we're currently in is the west wing of the Cannon building, and we will see some important work come up in the next month where a temporary roof will go over the 5th floor, and we'll then demolish the entire 5th floor of the building and construct a new 5th floor over the next 1.5 years or so. The next phase, during the next congressional move cycle, will happen on the north side of the building. That will take 2 years, 2 years on the east side, and then 2 years on the south side, and will be complete. It's going very well for us.
So a total of maybe like 4 years?
8 years.
8 years. Well, I hope it works out. I guess we have to have I know it's a major headache for you, 'cause you have to move all the offices back and forth. But I guess it'll be a prime piece of real estate to move back into once it's done. But you're moving them back in, phasing people back in though, right, as you're working?
That's correct. So the west phase now is completely abandoned, and we're demolishing all of the mechanical, electrical systems in the west wing of that building. When that's finished, we will move members from Cannon, Longworth, and Rayburn back into that phase, and at the same time, we'll empty the north wing of the building.
Thank you. Mr. Phil, are you auditing that? Have you your eyes on that, and making sure that everything is being done properly and correctly?
Yes, sir.
I mean, that's a pretty big project for you to jump right into, right? I mean,
It was, before I got here, was some oversight of the Cannon Renewal Project. We do provide quarterly updates to appropriate committees on that, so I have folks that are in there providing quarterly reports, and we are preparing to kick off an audit of contract change reports, so which often drive cost, often drive schedule, making changes to the contract. So we're going to look at that currently, and so hopefully have a report done by the end of the fiscal year on the contract change process.
thank you. And Ms. Davis, thank you for your service. I have no questions for you, but I don't want to leave you out.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. Chair will now recognize the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Walker, for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank the panel for being here today. A question, let me start with Mr. Ayers, if I could, please. The purpose in creating the independent IG within the Architect of the Capitol Office was to keep Congress and the AOC informed of risk, issues, and management challenges. During the fiscal years of 2012 through 2015, the AOC OIG, let me share that out, Architect of the Capitol Office of the Inspector General, failed to issue a single audit on any of the mega projects under construction by the AOC, which have an estimated combined cost of over $1.5 billion, as not telling anything you don't know here. But my question for you is, were you concerned by the lack of independent audits, and did you raise these concerns with anyone during those times?
Thank you, Mr. Walker. I certainly did, and I certainly have concern about that. And so let's talk about the big picture for a moment, the 8 years that we've had a statutory inspector general. During the first 5 years of having a statutory inspector general, no major projects, in fact, no construction projects, no projects at all were reviewed or audited or investigated by the IG. When our second statutory inspector general came into office, I challenged him, you have to turn this ship away from the variety of small, important, but small financial audits and churn that you're doing, and move this office to follow the money and start auditing major construction projects, as I believe that the Congress desired in setting up this act. I know that Inspector General worked hard to move in that direction. It was a very difficult transition from auditing financial work and credit card purchases to doing multi-million-dollar contracts. And we're now beginning to see the results of righting that ship. And we have the Capitol Power Plant cogeneration system audits under our belt, 2 on the Capitol Dome under our belt, on the Cannon Building under our belt, and our new Inspector General fully embraces this focus of auditing major projects.
Thank you for that answer. To use your words as you were talking, you said it was a very difficult transition. Was that due in any part because you were hindered in your ability to prioritize these projects?
I think it was due in part to skill set of the people that worked there at the time. I think it was due in part to lack of leadership and direction and really pushing this agenda forward in a strong way.
Okay, I appreciate your answer there. Mr. Faillo, what changes are necessary with respect to the OIG's current audit or investigating processes? Could you speak to that?
So as Mr. Ayers said, when the office was set up, its focus was not on producing mega project audits. It was set up very differently than it is acting today. It focused much on the fraud investigations, the investigations in that arm, and not solely on mega project audits. Today, we're trying to bring in the folks that can do that work, vice the people that were hired. I currently have 2 vacancies in my office, 1 for an auditor, and I'm advertising for that person to be a construction auditor so they can do proper audit work in the large construction areas.
All right, well, you're making a nice transition. We seem to be talking a lot about the past. Let's have a question about the future. How do you intend to partner with other stakeholders and oversight entities such as this committee in conducting your work moving forward? Do you have a vision, forecast? Can you share a little bit of that?
Yes, sir. So I have, in my first 30 days here, I have met with all the committees, staffers. I have met with all the jurisdiction heads within the AOC. I've worn holes in my shoes walking around the AOC to get to know people, understand the issues, find out what projects are going on, and also discuss with the committee members what their expectations of me are. I plan to meet monthly and quarterly with some and provide updates as requested, but in my meetings I'll always have an agenda. I will go over what we're currently investigating or looking at and provide them updates on the Cannon project and any other projects that we're currently in the process of doing.
Thank you, panel. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair will now recognize the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Loudermilk, for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate all the witnesses being here today. Mr. Ayers, just a couple of questions to clarify. I've heard a lot of numbers out here. How much was the cost overrun to the CVC? I've read 400 million, I've read 200 million. How much was that?
I would suspect it was $200 million approximately.
Okay. And how behind schedule was it in the completion?
Approximately 2 years.
2 years? Okay. I've read several. I just wanted to be clear, make sure that we were on that. With that information in mind, $200 million over 2 years behind schedule, what is different now to ensure that the Cannon Renewal Project, which is already $752.7 million, is going to stay within budget, hopefully under budget, hopefully on schedule? How are you going to ensure that, and what is different between now and the CVC?
I think there are a number of factors that go into that. First, every project's success, I believe, is first determined on developing what the project is, the scope of the project. And once you have that scope nailed down and don't change it until construction is complete, that ensures success.
So were there changes
There were
midway
hundreds
through
of
the
millions
CVC
of
project?
dollars of changes on the Capitol Visitor Center project throughout the job.
Were this because of structural design, or you encountered things that you didn't anticipate, rocks, things? I grew up in a construction family, so, okay.
All of those things, number one. And two, I think the most seminal change in that project was 9/11 happened after we had already awarded all of our construction projects and started construction. That required a complete redesign of all mechanical, electrical, and security systems in the building.
Okay.
It was a massive change after we had already awarded contracts. That's the worst thing that could happen.
So with that significant change, it would seem it would be, because you're changing a major project midstream, effective auditing and oversight seems to be, it would be more important then. What I was looking for is a more active IG. In your opinion, will that play a factor in helping to complete this project? With providing Congress and you with what may be happening, not at the surface level, but be able to audit, be able to investigate?
Yes, Mr. Loudermilk, I think it absolutely will. Not only our Inspector General is reviewing the project, but the Government Accountability Office is fully embedded on this project and keeping the Congress and me informed of what's going on. And so making sure that leadership and management is fully aware of the challenges that are present and the budget and schedule metrics on a job is important to the success of it.
Is there more transparency now than there was maybe with the Capitol Visitor Center?
I think that's probably a true statement, and let me give you a couple of examples of that. We meet every 30 days with the relevant committees and stakeholders on this project. That committee makes the important decisions of what happens on the job. We also issue all of the relevant committees a very detailed monthly report on all of the activities on the project. You can clearly see where money goes, what the risks are, how we're abating those risks, what the schedule is, and what the budget is in that monthly report. And we send to this committee, leadership, as well as the Appropriations Committee. So everyone is fully and concurrently aware of what's happening.
Okay. And a question for Mr. Fiala. This is in preparation if we have another round of questioning, because as I heard multiple numbers on CVC, I've heard 3 different pronunciations of your name. What is the proper pronunciation?
The proper pronunciation is Fiala.
Fiala, all right.
I go by a lot of names. Fiala works also, sir.
Well, I've found out after being this office, I have a whole lot more names out there, a lot of them that we can't speak of in this committee. But thank you for your service, and I'll yield back at this time, anticipating some more questions.
Gentleman from Georgia yields back and now recognize the Vice Chairman of the committee, Mr. Davis, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I can also reiterate it. Many do call him names that we can't pronounce here. But Mr. Fiala, right? Thank you, Fiala. There goes my time. Glad you asked that question, Barry. I'll come back to you, Mr. Fiala. But Mr. Ayers, thank you for what your office does. You have so many good employees. A few were up in my office yesterday, and they're always very responsive, and I would like you to relay my thanks to the many men and women who work for the AOC for the job that they do, keeping this campus as up to date and as beautiful as it is for not just members of Congress, but for the millions of people who come to our nation's capital each year. With that in mind, we see the CVC as a great, wonderful opportunity to bring many tourists in each year, but not without its problems in the building process, not without its problems as we move ahead and look at other projects like Cannon. And that's where we come in as a House Administration Committee. You've been the AOC and the deputy before that, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Were you surprised? I mean, please, were you surprised by the GAO findings that we talked
This
about today?
particular GAO
Yeah.
report?
Yeah.
I certainly wasn't surprised by the law enforcement discussion. I was certainly fully aware of that, and I know the back and forth of
What about-
deputizing. On the other
What about the
portion,
information, the quality of information that you were receiving from the OIG?
I'm certainly aware that our past IG took a completely different approach than the previous IG. And so it was no surprise to me to see that a accounting of the number of reports issued was very significantly different. That was not a surprise to me. It was a surprise to me to learn that perhaps some of our stakeholders are not being fully informed and kept up to date on the activities of the Office of Inspector
Did
General.
you express any concerns?
Absolutely, yes.
Who did you express those concerns to?
To the Inspector General.
To the Inspector General? To this committee at all?
Not to this committee, no.
Okay. The last Inspector General came from where?
He was the Deputy General Counsel in the Architect's Office of General Counsel.
So somebody that worked within your agency under your supervision.
Correct.
Did you select him?
I did select him.
Okay, okay.
He was not selected, he was not the first selectee. That's an important point. I've heard some criticism about that in the past, and not many people know that we actually offered that job to someone different than that IG, and we were not able to seal a deal with that applicant, and we went to this one.
Okay, when you saw a precipitous decline of monetary accomplishments associated with the changing practices of the last IG, did that alarm you?
It certainly alarmed me when I saw that in the GAO report, and I also would see that in the semi-annual reports to Congress that the IG submitted every 6 months.
Okay,
So I was aware of that, I saw that, but I also know I urge the IG, as you know, I can't direct the IG to do anything, but I urge them to stop looking at all of the things you were looking at in the past and look at the big construction projects and the more than 5,000 procurement actions that we take every year.
and that's exactly what we want your focus to be. And we also want you to communicate with us. We're here to help. We appreciate what you do, but it's frustrations we have with the process that we're talking about today and that was mentioned in the GAO study that bring you here today. And
Yes.
cause frustration, I'm sure, for you too. But we want to work with you, and we need open communication. Mr. Faila, thank you. I'm not going to subpoena your shoes you wore out, okay? But they told me I could, but I'm not going to do that.
It's true.
You've got a tough job in front of you. Obviously, there wasn't much communication with this committee from your predecessor. We just established that. I would urge you to understand that we are here to work with you to make sure projects get finished on time, but to also make sure that if there are concerns, there are issues, that we get them addressed. And I don't think that happened in the past, and I would urge you in your new position to make sure it happens in the future. And with that, I saw my red light. I yield back no balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. I'd like to ask a couple of follow-up questions, if I may, in this. And as we go through that, and Mr. Ayers, you said that while you don't obviously interfere with what the work of the IG is, you do express concerns that you have. But you are the person who appoints or names that person to be the IG, and you also have removal authority if they aren't doing their job. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and so you expressed some of these issues with the previous, Mr. Mulshine, the previous IG, and what was his response when you had those conversations with him?
He fully understood the concerns and often spoke about the challenges that he might be facing and his ability to move the office in this direction and righting the ship towards that goal. And we would have open conversations about the challenges and the expectations of me and the expectations of Congress.
This, of course, was a obviously a pattern or a problem for a number of years. Did it never rise to the level that you felt removal was necessary?
It did not.
Okay. All right. Ms. Davis, I had another question I wanted to ask you. In that November 2016 report, GAO noted that because of the OIG's insufficient audit planning, the OIG provided no audit reports of the AOC's mega projects with an estimated combined cost of over $1.1 billion, and the OIG provided limited audit oversight of the AOC's jurisdictions and offices. So we know we discussed that in this hearing. I guess the biggest thing would be is, do you have any sense at this point whether or not those have been corrected, any follow-up, and whether or not the OIG has adopted the SIGI quality standards for federal inspectors general?
I do not have that information. I will say that the Inspector General at the time did agree with the recommendations that we made, and based on some comments that have been made here today, I understand that progress is being made in addressing our recommendations, but we have not done an analysis of the operations or the activities at this point.
And you do anticipate to do an analysis or further review, would that be correct?
We will do a follow-up of the recommendations.
And when might that be?
I would say in the next few months would be
Okay.
reasonable.
Certainly, before the end of the year, you would have looked at
Yes,
this and done
yes,
another review.
absolutely.
Would that be correct? Let me ask you, for you, how important are those standards to an office?
They're the standards that are established by SIGI for looking at the risk assessment or performing a risk assessment and determining, what jobs need to be placed in priority is extremely important. And I say that because often offices will have a peer review. The peer review will be based on particular engagements, and those engagements will be reviewed during a peer review. However, when GAO goes in to conduct an audit, we look a little bit more broadly at whether or not the audit coverage that's intended is actually there and effective. So that is important to make sure that the audit coverage is based on prioritization of risks, and that that work is being done.
Right. Well, we'll look forward to a future follow-up on these issues as well, and certainly I can think of incredible responsibilities that your office has, Mr. Ayers. This is, it is a daunting task that you have to juggle these even multiple mega projects, but all of the things that have to be done. Our objective here is to provide our oversight that we need to do. We're also here to help. And it's better for us if we know when there's an issue rather than read about it in a GAO report. I think that's best for everybody. And Mr. Fiala, if you have any questions, we're all available to help in any way we can. We wish you the best. You're almost like the person that, almost like the dog that caught the car, so here you are. So we wish you the best. That's a very challenging job you have. Mr. Brady, any follow-up for you? Mr. Loudermilk, you have any follow-up questions before we adjourn?
Yes, if I may, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Fiala, or Fiala. I even asked and then I pronounced it wrong. Just a couple questions for you and one for Ms. Davis. As I was looking at the numbers on the CVC, originally anticipated to be $295 million, ended up being $600 million. I mean, it's almost enough to build another structure. I mean, that's a significant increase. Considering the Cannon renewal and other major projects, we have the Rayburn the Rayburn parking. There's several other things going on. Do you feel, in your current position, do you have the proper amount of tools, resources, authority, and flexibility to do your job properly?
Like when I first came on board here, looking at the number of FTE that we have to do the work that we need to do and the oversight that we need to do, I do not feel that we have enough personnel to do it.
Okay.
Currently, my office, and this is no fault of anyone else's, but we had a death before I arrived. We lost one of our more experienced auditors, so we're trying to fill that position now. My deputy and lead counsel has accepted a position at Ability One as the next IG there, so that position is vacant, so I have no second nor counsel. And my AIG for audit had back surgery last Thursday, and he's going to be convalescing up to 6 weeks. I have a very small office to begin with, and I'm already well behind and trying to do the things that I'm being asked to do. So that's where the reprioritization comes in. I'm trying to take on the things that are important, continue to do the quarterly audits that are been mandated by us, but also trying to get a project or two out and do them in smaller scoped projects that my folks that I have on board can handle, get things done that we can effect change on and show results and bring back stuff. I think what happened previously, in the way the process was working with the IG, I don't want you to think that he wasn't, and the folks in my office weren't doing their job or doing work. They were. They were just doing it in a different way. They were reporting on things as a running kind of project and commentary. If they saw something, they would tell project managers that this was even to be a problem and had a recommendation for it, but they weren't putting it into reports. I think that's what the change has to be, and is going to be with my office.
Does the lack of criminal investigatory powers inhibit your ability to effectively do the job?
I think it concerns me, for sure, to fight fraud and to look at the criminal aspects that could be taking place, bribery, et cetera, things like that, where we could stop it. And I am leaning in that direction of bringing back criminal investigators.
Thank you.
I'd like to say that a criminal investigator is not a gun.
Right.
And,
Exactly.
and that's the kind of the big point I'd like to make about it. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a gun. And my folks, you know, when I get to know them a little better, and after this peer review, and I can make that decision freely and wisely, I will have things in place that ensure that folks within the AOC are never intimidated nor see a gun.
Well, and I would reemphasize that many investigators in the criminal field, especially forensic investigators dealing with information technology, never carry a gun. Never, they're digging through computer files, or digging, their investigation is done tracking documents. And so I appreciate you bringing that up. Ms. Davis, basically the same question, but from your opinion, does Mr. Failla have the tools, the resources, the authority, and the flexibility he needs to ensure that his job can be done effectively?
I would like very much to answer that question, but I don't have the knowledge to answer that question, or we have not done research in that area.
Okay, if you would let us know at the point that you have the opportunity to do that, I appreciate it, because our objective is to see the success of these projects and of the office. And I may close with this, Mr. Chairman. Recently, we had a bridge that made national news in Georgia, in Atlanta, burned down. The initial estimates, and it was a major interstate, created a lot of problems. Original estimates is that it was going to take 6 months to build that. It's open. It was just a matter of weeks to not only repair it, but actually do other road improvements. I was on the phone with the contractor. I said, how do we do this so fast? He said, basically, the federal government got out of the way. I would hope that maybe we'd take a look at some of the restrictions and obstacles that we face, and maybe a 10-year project could end up being a 5-year project if we didn't restrict our own selves. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days to submit to the chair additional written questions for the witnesses, which we would forward to you and ask that you respond as promptly as you can to those, so that those answers can be made a part of the record. Before I adjourn the hearing, I want to take a moment to congratulate one of our committee members. This week marks the 10th anniversary of Mr. Brady's service as the ranking Democratic member or chairman of this committee. While Mr. Brady and I, maybe sometimes we need an interpreter, but we tell you, and we may disagree. We come from obviously different political backgrounds, but I can think of no one that I respect more, or even when we disagree, it's friendly, and he's become a dear friend. So we want to congratulate you, Mr. Brady, on that service. Thank you so much. And Thank you, and, but thank you all for being here. Without objection, the hearing is adjourned.
All right, thank you.